Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience of therapists, and I mean people like physiotherapists, occupational therapists. What I would say is they've given me an awful lot of help, and what they do is really exceptional, and they've been very useful to me in terms of how much they've helped me progress. There are some points there that I would like to talk about regarding how therapists actually work with patients. I think the first thing to bear in mind, and I don't know if therapists always realise this, but patients do give a lot of trust and a lot of credence to the therapists. They respect them, they rely on them a lot, and quite deservedly so. I mean, these are people who are expert in their field of practice, and it's something that I've always been aware of, that they're aware of what helps and good practice. What I would say though is maybe to be aware a little bit more of the broader picture with patients that you're working with. I think one of the first things is awareness of the patient's self-esteem, and I suppose the whole psychological position. If I can give you an example, when I was in a unit at one point, I'd basically been treated like a patient, but the idea of the unit was then to get you to become more independent. Now, I'd been used to having, much like on a hospital ward, breakfast served each day, came round with the nursing staff. And anyway, all of a sudden, one morning the staff came past with the trolley, and they just said to me, "You're not having breakfast today, you've got to get up and get your own. You're going to be part of the breakfast club." So, first of all, what's the breakfast club? Nobody discussed it with me. Nobody said, "Is this what you want? Are you happy to do it? Do you feel you're ready for it?" Nothing. No, I was just informed that if I wanted breakfast, to go and get it. Now, again, I'm not against the actual idea of the club. The idea was to get people more independent, looking after themselves, getting up, getting their own breakfast. And it was all part of developing your independence, which was absolutely fine. The actual reality of it though was slightly different, because first of all, as a patient, I thought, well, nobody's taken into consideration how I feel about this, or even discussed it with me. I was just told this is what's happening. For me, it meant actually going down. You had to walk past loads of offices in your nightwear. I got to the kitchen area, and there was a student therapist assessing me, making a cup of tea, making some toast. I hadn't been told any of this, and I found it the most degrading experience for a long time. It was absolutely awful. There was nothing about real life in it. First of all, I don't walk round offices in my dressing gown. I'm not a morning person anyway, and I may not actually get up and make much breakfast, and I certainly don't want somebody watching me. I mean, I think many people, it's a struggle to get up and get ready to face the world, and the last thing you want is to be assessed. So because none of this was discussed, it basically turned me right against it, and I ended up refusing to go to it. I wanted no part of it, and it was a very negative experience for me. Now, I say the idea of it was very good, to help people to become more independent, but that has to connect with reality. Do people at home, I would never get up and sit at a table and eat my breakfast. I'd sit in front of the telly with a cup of tea and a piece of toast maybe. And this is the thing, that you have to be realistic in doing this. I think another thing to bear in mind with patients, again to do with the self-esteem, is people in the past may well have been very physically fit and active, and when you're asked to do various tasks, although they're very appropriate for your physical health, it might be quite difficult in the sense that you feel a bit stupid. I mean, for example, in the past I used to play a lot of sport and badminton, and I was quite active, and I was proud of that. Now, because of my physical health, I couldn't play this anymore, and as part of my rehabilitation, I had to do things like sitting on these big round balls and catching bean bags, and basically I felt like a performing seal. I'm not saying I could have done more, but were people actually aware of how it makes the patient feel? You feel demoralised, you feel stupid. Maybe just show a bit of awareness and discuss this with the patient. How do they feel about doing these tasks, which are, very, very degrading, you think, is this what I've been reduced to? Another thing to do with this as well is be aware of who else is around. I mean, I have been in situations where I've gone into a gym to do this and been surrounded not only by other patients, but by visitors and carers who were sat around the edge of the gym, just sort of watching people. And the last thing on earth you want, not only doing these exercises you're not comfortable with, but to have people watching. It's inappropriate. So, please try and consider patients when you're doing things like this. Make sure it's private. It's about you and your patient. Look at get to know them, look at the broader picture. I've talked about what's going on a lot in patients' lives, so maybe be a bit more aware of this. Did they used to be very fit and active? How does it feel having to do these very basic tasks? And I think basically, look at the broader picture. Another thing I think is important, I mentioned before about respect, and you do rely on therapists. Now, I had a situation where at the time I was with an occupational therapist, and my agreed goal for this session was to walk a certain distance up to a shop, and the agreement was if I did that, then we'd get a taxi home, because that would be enough for that session. Now, what actually happened is I put everything into this, and I got to the shop, I was very pleased with myself, and the therapist said, yes, that's very good, right, I think we should walk back. Now, again, it was how it was done. If she'd maybe said to me, would you like to walk back, do you feel up to it, obviously they're going to try and push you a bit, but don't change the goalposts, because I find that again it is just wrong for a patient. I put all my energy into doing this, and I didn't have much left on this occasion, and then to have the goalpost change like that was very, very difficult, and sadly I did lose an awful lot of respect from my therapist. I lost a lot of trust in her. So if you're going to do that, I can't trust you. Then what she did do was she said, because I had a physio session straight after, and she said, well, I'll have a word with the physio and ask her not to do anything too strenuous in terms of walking in your session. And obviously she'd spoken to the physio, who had quite rightly in her own professional capacity had said, probably it's nothing to do with you, what I do in my session. This is what I've got set for today, and this is what we're going to do, which was actually, again, very physically tiring. So by the end of it, I was absolutely good for nothing. I had all these things that I was doing, that the professionals, were doing their own professional job and not working together, and maybe taking offence at each other, quite rightly. I think a lot of people would if somebody tries to dictate your work. But unfortunately, I was the patient in the middle at the end of all this, like a wet rag, good for nothing. And I was totally fed up with therapists in general that day. I thought, you're not considering the actual patient. So this is something that I'd really like to draw your attention to be aware of that. And I think it goes back to this communication between professionals, again, which happens a lot, and whether it's just making sure the referral goes through, keep track of your referrals. If you send a patient to see somebody else, make sure that appointment, that referral's gone through, because I've mentioned it with other things, but the number of times I've slipped through the gaps. I'm meant to have had physio appointments that haven't been sent out. I was meant to have seen a psychologist that never got sent through. All sorts of appointments just, keeps slipping through all the time. So, you know, I feel that maybe therapists and all professionals should take responsibility for their patient until they're in a sense handed over to the appropriate person. You know that that work is being carried out, and other than the patient just being left on their own, and often things aren't carried out and basically left in the